So, welcome to Fucked Up Fables. If destroying your childhood is something you enjoy, you've come to the right place. This month, we are celebrating May Day. Not like Mayday, Mayday, my ship is coming down, like May Day.
It's a holiday, May 1st.
So this event takes place on either the 1st of May or the first Monday in May. So, Titania, do you want to explain a little bit about what May Day actually is?
I'm going to first start off with a disclaimer that my knowledge is old, and I decided to try and see if I could pull it from memory and let Enkidu correct me. Not if, when I go horribly wrong. So, May Day, there are two versions, I guess you could say, that I know. So there's the one that I learned in high school because we learned how to do a May Day dance in PE. It was literally a pole dance, but not like a pole, not like stripper pole dance.
Yeah.
But like the pole with the ribbons hanging off of it, and you like weave them around the pole. So May 1st, May Day, was typically celebrated for several hundred years. I say several hundred years. It's much older than that, but this is my knowledge. Because like I'm thinking Tudor times and before that, it was a fertility celebration. So spring, it's like bringing in spring. Spring is the season of fertility and renewal and birth. So you have this festival, and the people who wanted to get pregnant that year would do this dance around the pole, and it's really cool how the ribbons weave around themselves and they go all the way to the bottom. You tie it off, and the whole thing is like, if you can get to the bottom without messing up, it's good luck, good fortune for your fertility, I guess. And then like they would leave that pole and the ribbons on it up. I'm pretty sure in most festivals there's a May Day queen that is also crowned during this time. I don't remember much of the details. We all joke that it was really funny that a bunch of 16-year-olds were doing a fertility dance. So, and then the other part that I know of is oftentimes in faerie, May Day is one of those other times when the veil is somewhat thinner. It's not like All Saints Day, but it's more like you're more able to accidentally cross into faerie.
I have a reasoning for that now that I know how that in between works.
Yeah, so it's like the opposite. So like All Saints Day, fairies typically come into the world, and then this is the opposite, where you could find yourself in faerie and then not be able to find your way out again.
That's
forever.
I mean, that's pretty good. My knowledge is, I said this off camera, but my knowledge is more of the like Wiccan pagan side of it. So May Day is the halfway point between spring and summer, and it falls on what is called a cross point. So you have, so it's an in-between, which is why that's kind of funny that I know what that is now.
That makes sense. Everything makes sense, right?
Yeah, so it falls on a cross point, and then there is one between the fall equinox and the winter solstice as well, which is probably going to be right around, I would assume right around All Saints Day. So maybe that's why that one's also one. I don't know when that one is, but that could also be.
So All Saints Day has been taken over by Christians, and that is November 1st.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
November 1st.
Yeah,
I've only been Catholic.
It's the day after All Souls Day.
I should say it's been taken over by Catholics, because I grew up Baptist and we didn't have All Saints Day. Now that I'm Catholic, I'm like, what's that? Yeah. And I spent my first year as an official Catholic in quarantine, so I have to do nothing. So I have no idea.
So not only does it fall on a cross point, like you said, it is a big fertility celebration, but it is also the celebration of spring, because this is when the first crops that you would have planted would have started to sprout.
Your winter crop.
And so what they would also do is bring in fresh branches to welcome in good fortune. So they would take like a cutting of a branch and put it in their home. So that's called bringing in May. So if you've ever heard that phrase, that's what that means, bringing in May. It's a very European thing, because we don't celebrate this here in America. And the reason for that is because the Puritans thought that it was
no fun. If it's fun, it's bad.
Yeah, so that's why we don't really celebrate.
Wait.
It's like a huge thing in Europe. But yeah, they call it
bringing a bow, you said. Am I correct in thinking that Rockabye Baby, the verse "When the Bow Breaks," is tied something to this?
Could be. I don't know anything about nursery rhymes other than Humpty Dumpty and London Bridge.
We need a nursery rhyme month.
I don't actually know. I don't know that. And then the other big thing that you would do is that you would have like a large bonfire, or like nowadays you might have like a grouping of candles together, and everyone would jump over it, and that kind of helps cleanse you and bring you into like the rest of the year, new beginnings, all of that stuff. Sorry if you hear some noise. Bailey is being very loud over there, licking on her bowl.
Bailey's a dog. That sounds like a person. Bailey's licking on her bowl over there.
Bailey's a cute little pupper that I'm watching. But yeah, that's kind of like the brief overview of what May Day is. And then what you were talking about is the May Day pole. And that's where they would do all of that dancing and stuff.
Yeah.
So it may seem kind of crazy to be like, well, how many stories involve May Day? I don't know what you found, but let me tell you, I found at least 2 that I had no idea were even related to this. I was like,
I mean, May Day's been around for so long. I'm sure there's hundreds of stories.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Around it.
Yeah, most likely.
Even in the Tudors, the TV show.
Yeah. It's been around for forever. Yeah. So in honor of May Day today, I'm going to tell you the story of an event that happened in a little town in Germany called Hamelin. And like with all stories on this channel, this one blends history and folklore together into a story that's been told hundreds of times in different ways and told all over the world. This isn't just exclusive to Europe. Most people probably know this story. But I do want you to keep in mind that this is probably going to be the most true story we will ever tell on this channel.
Maybe. Depends on if you believe in fairies.
Yeah. And then I do have a pretty heavy content warning for animal abuse and the death of children. So that's all that's happening in this, but it is pretty hefty.
We're stepping back into our actual fucked up fables.
Oh, yeah, we are. This is pretty fucked up. April was like a palate cleanser, and now we're just like, bam, right back at it. All right. The year is 1284, and May Day is fast approaching. As the town begins to prepare, they start to notice strange things happening. I'm sorry, my camera just shook. I also apologize. This is going to be a very story-like. That's okay.
I like stories.
I know. Story time. First, their food is being eaten and disappearing at an alarming rate. Cheese is filled with holes, bread is reduced to crumbs, and no matter what the people do to bar their larders, they're still having food go missing from it. So that's the first thing happening.
Sounds like fairies to me.
Secondly, people are starting to notice that their clothes have holes in them. So you got boxes, chests, closets, all of that to hold their clothes in, and it's still unable to keep them safe. And more people are waking up to find holes in their pockets and their dresses. String to like repair their clothes is missing. Socks have been completely, eaten away at the end of it. So it's just now a tube. Hymns are destroyed, everything. So whatever is happening in this town, it is affecting everyone universally. And the final straw is that people start to report babies and small children being bitten. They go to sleep perfectly fine, but when they wake up, they find bite marks all over their babies, and the children are even waking up in the middle of the night crying because something has attacked them. They're starting to get sick, they're getting infections from it, they're bleeding everywhere, and no one seems to really know like where this is all coming from or what's causing it. At this point, the people of Hamelin are fed up. Their children are not safe, and the city needs to do something about it. So the people band together and storm the town hall, demanding that the mayor of Hamelin do something about this malicious invasion on their town. But the mayor doesn't know what to do. He puts out a request for someone to come and figure out a solution to their problem because they don't know what the problem is, so they can't solve it. And that the town will pay whatever the cost is to be rid of their current problems. And a couple of days later, someone responds, as they all do in these stories. A man enters the town and asks for directions to the mayor's office in town hall. The people point him in the right direction and are a little perplexed at the way that this man looks. He's wearing really strange, brightly colored clothing, and he carries a flute with him. And as he's walking, he starts whistling this like happy tune. So he probably like skips a little bit as he's going. So he just looks like really weird and out of place in 1200s Germany. At last, he reaches the mayor and he tells him that he has come to fix the town's problem. And the mayor says, get rid of whatever it is that's plaguing us and you'll be rewarded. Like, just whatever it is, we'll pay it, we'll cover it. He's like, okay. So he smiles, he bows, accepts the terms, and he says, 1,000 gold pieces, I'll fix the town. And the mayor's like, dope, I got you. Let's do it. So this man leaves the town hall. He stops in the street and he looks to the left, then he looks to the right, and then he lifts up his flute and he starts to play this beautiful tune. And the people.
I should have pulled my flute out for this and did some background music.
Well, maybe not. The people in town watch as slowly these tiny black masses start making their way from all over the town to the piper. So they're kind of like swarming towards him. And they're kind of like doing this swaying motion. I feel like a Congo line. Dun, 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 dun. They're like completely entranced. And as more and more of these start to appear, people start to realize that they have been plagued by a rat infestation.
Gross. This is how you get the plague.
Well, it is 1284, so we're getting close. So as they're seeing these rats come out, they're watching gleefully as the newcomer starts almost like leading them away from the town. He's like playing this flute and walking away, and the rats are just following Congo line style.
How is that gleeful? If you see, so like if you've ever seen like any animations of this scene, it's usually like the roads are filled with rats, like a river of rats running down this road. Why would you be gleefully watching that? Wouldn't you be going, oh my God, there are so many rats?
They're gleeful because horrifying. The rats are leaving. Like all of the rats are leaving.
Wasn't it Australia that had a similar issue where they were just overran by mice?
Possibly.
Somebody Google it and let me know if I'm right. I could just be hallucinating.
They could have. A lot of mice families live like in tunnels underground and stuff. So like I could imagine it living out in like their more rural areas and like more wilderness. And then like if like, you know, like with the wildfire or something coming, they would flee. So like I could see that.
Yeah, maybe. I'm gonna have to look that up.
I don't know if that's what actually happened. That just makes
vague memory of it.
Yeah, so this piper is leading these rats. He's leading him from the town down this path through a forest and towards this like stream or river nearby. And he continues to play as he makes his way there. And then he eventually reaches the edge of the water and he kind of stops and turns around to watch the rats and he like changes the tune. So it's like a little bit more like soulful, a little more depressing, sad song. And he plays this until every single last rat has entered into the water and drowned. So there is nothing left. It's just a sea of now black. It's kind of gross for their water, but whatever. So, job done. He returns to town with a smile, and everyone who meets him on the way thanks him for his hard work and what he has done to help rid them of this problem. He returns to the mayor's office and lets him know that the job is now officially done. No more rats, you're good, you're golden. The mayor thanks him and asks for a couple of days to gather the money to pay him. And the piper says, sure, no problem. I'll return in 3 days to come and collect the reward, bows, and then just skips right on out of town. Good as, I don't know. I was going to say good as new, but that doesn't make any sense. Well, the town of Hamelin is free of rats, but now they do have a slightly bigger problem, and that is paying the Pied Piper. The mayor gathers everyone for like a town meeting to address this issue because the town itself doesn't have the money. So he's like, in order to pay for this, everyone needs to pay in. So everyone needs to contribute something so that we can raise the funds so that we can pay this piper for what he did. Town doesn't like this idea. They don't want to pay him. They, as far as they can see, they didn't even ask for this guy to come up here and do this. This wasn't what they wanted. Right, I'm like, but you guys literally just did say, fix this problem. So soon enough, the entire town is against paying this man for, his deed. And like, people are starting to get angry at the thought that the mayor would even like demand that they pay this reward. And then finally someone speaks up and says, why should we even pay him? If the rats are gone, it's his fault for not asking for the money before he did anything.
Oh, don't be a douche.
Well, soon enough, the entire town agrees, and they're not going to pay a single coin for what just happened.
I'm pretty sure with the rats leaving town, that's where most children's stories stop when it comes to this. Like, I think that's where it is. Like, happily, and they all lived happily ever after. Now, adding on this extra bit of a douchebag town, we should ask for it up front.
Yeah, they don't. Happily ever after doesn't exist in real fairy tales.
It really doesn't.
I think we went on a huge rant about this, about how no one is ever happy. Like, it's always something. It's always someone who's not happy. All right, so they're like, yeah, we're not going to pay him. When he comes, what's he going to do? The rats are gone, so there's nothing more that like this guy can do to hold against them. So now that they are all in agreement, they wait the 3 days or however many days from this town meeting for the piper to return. And then on that third day, as promised, the piper returns with a little spring in his step because he's like, I'm about to get 1,000 gold pieces for playing my little flute. I mean, if it worked.
Good pay for a musician.
Right? So he cheerily greets the mayor and then asks for his reward. And the mayor is quiet for a moment, looking at the man before telling the piper, we thank you for taking care of our rat problem, but we don't owe you anything. And so the piper kind of laughs a little, assumes it's like a joke, and is like, we had a deal, remember? 1,000 gold coins for the cure to your plague. And the mayor just shakes his head and, like motions to his desk where he has all these papers, and he says, I have no such deal here, because they didn't write it down. And now the piper is upset, as anyone would be in their right mind. He was promised a reward, and they're now reneging on that. They are refusing to pay it. So they kind of like argue for a couple minutes before the mayor demands him to leave town and never return. And so the piper hangs his head in defeat, and he's like, fine, I'll leave. Leaves the office and walks down to the street, and he looks to his left, he looks to the right, and then he pulls out his flute again and begins to play a song. And this one is more like what he played when he led the rats into the water. It's a very sorrowful, very moving, depressing, sad piece, just kind of like explaining his emotions at the moment. And it also just shows like how skilled he was at playing on this flute. He'd be a flautist. What they're called. Yeah. I don't know why they call him a piper.
It's an old word for it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The more you know. I did not know that. Yeah. And now the town folks listen, but they're not like really paying him any mind. They're like, he's on his way out. He's just playing a song as he leaves. We're going to go about our day. And it's fine. And as the piper starts to walk down the street playing the flute, the children in town kind of like stop playing or stop what they're doing to like pay attention to him and see what he's doing. And they're like, hey, like, I like this song. This guy's kind of kooky looking. He's brightly colored. So they kind of like start following him, and they're kind of like laughing and giggling, kind of like, playing that like whole, like red light, green light thing, where they're like, we're going to walk a little and then we're going to stop and then we're going to walk some more, like, he doesn't know that we're here walking behind him sort of deal. So like playing a game with him. And so they follow him out of town. They follow him down the hill. They go through the small forest and then right to the same stream that he had led the rats to 3 days prior. And then like before, he stops at the river's edge, changes the song a little bit, and plays until every single child has entered the water and drowns. Now, Flipping back over to Hamelin.
To pay 1,000 gold pieces.
People are starting to prepare for dinner, and they notice like the town is kind of quiet. They don't really like think much about it, so they just like start calling for their kids to return home. Like as we did back in the 90s when, someone pokes their head out and was like dinner time, and all the kids just like disperse to their houses. That whole thing. And they're just like, oh, maybe they wandered down to where the maypole was, because the maypole is typically like not, it's a little bit out of the way, so they had room to do everything. So like, oh, they're just playing down there, it's fine. But no kids come running, and like it's starting to get later, and they're kind of starting to worry. And then they see 3 kids coming. So the parents are like kind of running around trying to figure out what's going on, and they see these 3 kids returning to the town square from down this path where they had like gone. And these 3 kids were super well known in town because one of them was lame and walked very slow. One of them was blind, and one of them was deaf. So of course they are bombarded with questions, and they are like, we'll tell you what happened. So they begin to tell their tale, and that's when the town learns exactly what had happened. As payment for ridding the town of rats, the Pied Piper had lured the children away, and the 3 boys were unable to follow because of their disabilities and thus were saved. They didn't know exactly what had happened, but they knew the direction they went. They just couldn't keep up, so they didn't actually see what had happened.
Okay.
So, yeah. So in a panic, the parents are like running from town. They go down the hill, through the forest, and they come to the water, and they find all 130 children floating dead in the water, and the Piper is nowhere to be seen. And for weeks, they tried to find the man. They like reach out to neighboring towns asking about him, put out a reward for him. But they never hear anything. No one ever sees him, and he never returns. So the streets of Hamelin were super quiet. There were no more rats, and the people had been able to keep their money, which is great. But a dark cloud had started to settle over the town at the realization that the price they had paid for ridding the town of rats was 130 children.
Yep.
It's crazy. Instead of paying 1,000 gold coins, you paid with 130 children. Yeah. Now, again, this is probably like a way darker version than you're used to hearing. There are lots and lots of different versions of this story, and I think they all kind of like end at varying points, kind of throughout.
Like I was saying, I think like when we're younger and we hear about the story in school and in the children's books, I think it stops with he let all of the rats out of town.
Yeah, it's a little crazy. So now, like, I want you to bring that thought back when I told you at the beginning that, this is probably real. And I'm sure someone out there is like, how could it be real? Because who the fuck is using a magic flute to kill 130 children? Wow.
No, wait, not me. I heard magic flute and I went, yes! And then you went kill 130. I went, no.
Right. Now, a lot of this was definitely embellished. So like there probably wasn't a magic flute. And the number of kids probably wasn't 130. It's just like a big shocking number. We see this actually a lot in mythology when they're talking about, it was 100 years, it was 10 years. It's just like a big, nice, round, shocking number to explain a lot of time, a lot of people, whatever it is. That's just the way that they do things. But we do have historical records stating that something happened in Hamelin that caused a large portion of their children to disappear, die, get abducted by aliens, sold as slaves. We don't actually know what happened. But I'm going to tell you what we do know. So there is this book from the mayor of Hamelin who makes mention of this event by writing, "It's been 100 years since the children left." And this was dated, wow, that was my child. This was dated to 1384, hence the date of 1284. And now in the 1300s, Hamelin had this like stained glass window made. She's playing Among Us. So they have this stained glass window made in a church that showed a Pied Piper and then like a handful of kids following behind it. Now the window was destroyed in 1660, I believe, by a fire. But they have records very detailed records describing what it looked like before it was destroyed. And so later a guy named Hans Doberton actually came back and made a recreation based on those descriptions. So we do actually have the stained glass again, just based on those descriptions. Yep. So like we have evidence that this event actually happened. Now we don't have details. It's one thing we're missing, but there are some widely accepted theories on what happened. But before I like get into those theories, I feel like there's two things that I actually need to explain. The first is, what is a Pied Piper? And the second is, what the fuck is with the rats? So a Pied Piper. I tried to think about like what my like 10-year-old brain imagined when I heard the term Pied Piper. And I'm pretty sure that it was definitely not what a Pied Piper actually is. And I was actually kind of disappointed to learn that a Pied Piper just means a guy who wore two colored clothes. Yep. Like classic Harley Quinn suit is a pied suit. That's what it's called. That's just the term. I was very disappointed. I was like, I'm sorry, that's all a Pied Piper is it's a dude who plays the flute who wears two-toned clothes. Yep. And then the rats. So the rats were actually added to the story somewhere in the 1500s. And it's probably to make the story longer and also to make it a lot less fucked up. Because if you take out the rats, it's just about this Pied Piper who comes to Hamelin to lure away the kids and then they just fucking disappear or die.
Or
just because
maybe he came and demanded money, and when they didn't pay up, took the kids.
True. Yeah. So we're going to go into some prevailing theories. Now, I know you know about the story. Do you know anything about like the theories or the history of Hamelin?
I just know that children disappeared.
Okay.
So I also know that there's another version of the story out there where I'm pretty sure they thought that the Piper was actually like a demon and that it stole the souls of the children.
Yeah, we'll kind of talk about like some very close / adjacent things to that. So the first one that you will typically find is the belief that some type of natural event occurred, either a disease, a plague. Again, we're talking like really close to the 1800s, to the 1300s, which is when the bubonic plague really hit its boom. There's possible talks of a landslide, a mass drowning, so either like from like a flood or the kids being out there playing and an accident just occurred. Sinkholes have even been used as a possible reasoning, and starvation is another prevailing one. So in this theory of the story, the Pied Piper plays a more symbolic role. He is representative of death, leading the children away into the afterlife. So he would be like the angel of death leading them away. And in line with this theory is a small like subset theory that the Pied Piper actually represents a pagan leader who was known to live in the forest nearby. There was like a small pagan group in that area. And some people believe that he somehow lured the kids away from the town and then they died as part of some like ritual sacrifice, or being in that forest, some natural event like a landslide happened. It just happened to happen while they were there with him. That's the first big grouping of theories. So that kind of plays into like that whole, children just died. The second biggest theory is the theory of immigration, not like IMM, but immigration. This is actually a really common theory for several other occurrences of large groups of people that disappear, such as the events that happened in Roanoke and what happened to the Cahokia Native Americans, which are two groups of people that disappeared and we have no record of what actually happened to them. So what this means is that people of the area were in such dire needs that they essentially went elsewhere. So something happened to wherever they were located that caused some, if not all of the people to have to leave. Now, it's not necessarily like they were overrun, they were being in battle, they were like captured and taken as slaves, but they were like relocated, either willing or unwilling. It was a common practice back in this time that when cities would become overpopulated, they would send large groups away to settle a newer area or a less populated city. So they'd have like a large group that would just leave so they could keep their population under control, along with settling other areas that would like foster trade and relations and stuff like that. And they weren't even necessarily children that they would send, because they obviously want to send like workers and people who can help out. And during this time period in Europe, it was very common for people of a town to be referred to as children. So the people of Hamelin would have been referred to as the children of Hamelin.
Okay.
Yeah, so furthering this theory is that we have evidence that parts of Eastern Europe, and more specifically the areas of Transylvania and its surrounding areas, have families who bear identical or very similar names to names found in Hamelin. Remember, Hamelin is in Germany, so it doesn't make sense for people in Hamelin to have the same last name as people in Transylvania. So there are people in Transylvania with very German names.
My vote's going for this theory.
Yeah, and so during this time in the late 1200s, the Mongols were actually very aggressive, destroying Eastern Europe, and Transylvania was one of those places that was greatly affected by all of this and had to basically rebuild. So if Hamelin was having a population issue, it would make sense that they would send people away to like Transylvania, which helps benefit both sides. They could help rebuild, they have population under control, it fosters that trade going on, and they could like continue growing. And also in the Baltic region, which I don't know my geography, so I don't know where the fuck the Baltic region is, but in the Baltic region in the 1200s, they open up to colonization. That was an appropriate time to scream by the Germans, who like could also lead to this theory. And we do see that where we see German names in this area where they shouldn't actually be. This theory is the most widely accepted theory, and this is actually the one that is listed officially in the town of Hamelin. So the town of Hamelin is a place you can go and visit. It's absolutely awesome. They always do a festival for the Pied Piper. It's beautiful. There is a guy who literally gets the job to be the Pied Piper. It's really cool.
Nice.
They have like a whole thing. It's really cool. And like I said, you can go and visit the church. You can see the recreated stained glass window. Like they have all of it. It's actually kind of cool. Now, I did say at the very beginning of the story, and I kind of mentioned like the maypole. It's kind of like, if we don't know exactly what happened or when it occurred, what does this have to do with May Day? And why did I specifically mention May Day? And the reason that I did that is because if you believe that it was in fact children in Hamelin, and there was a nearby group of pagans, then you will see this theory pop up that during a May Day celebration, one of the members or the leader came to town and invited a bunch of children to go play by the maypole. And the adults, for whatever reason, don't see any issue with it. Whether they didn't notice him or didn't notice that he wasn't like one of their members of the town is unknown. But the maypole would have been farther away from where the town was, probably in an open area and probably near the forest, which is how they would have used that ruse to move them into the forest, and then no one would know until it was too late. And then they would do it for whatever sacrifice thing they believe was going on. And I personally think it's immigration theory. It's also why they wouldn't have really had records of it, because it was such a common thing back then.
Why would you write that down?
Yeah, why would they write down who went where? You know, it was probably just a bunch of people who volunteered, you know, yeah, I'll go. Okay. You know, you're good. So probably what happened. So yeah, that is a fairy tale based on an actual event.
We have to find another fairy tale that's based on actual event.
Yeah, I didn't know for the longest time that this was like a real place and that like this was like a real thing that, I mean, like I said, we don't really know what happened, but you know, something happened. So it's kind of cool. Yeah. That's all I have. That was it. That was my lovely story, creepy story about the Pied Piper of Hamelin.
Man, we are truly ruining childhood.
I swear, I remember seeing the picture of the rats being let into the water. Like, I don't know what that is in or from, but I remember it.
Yeah, and I remember the drawing of the Pied Piper looking like the demon. Like,
Yeah.
but that's a
Yeah,
fairly recent like within the past probably 5 years that I ran
yeah.
across that one.
I mean, it can make sense. Like I said, they told this story all over, and I mean, we had a lot of German immigrants come to America, and combine their beliefs and their stories with like the Puritans, and makes sense that it would be the devil or the demon or something that did all that.
Had like the most German name.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
Maybe I heard it from her.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So that's my story for today.
Guess that's all we have.
Well, I guess we'll see what Titania has for us next week. Bye.